Gameranx presents the 10 things you need to know when starting a new game in Dark Souls 3, because let's be honest, the Souls series is notorious for not holding your hand, and that's great. It shows that From Software has a level of respect for its players and fanbase that is rarely seen in video games, a faith that players are smart enough to figure out its mechanics without overbearing tutorials. That being said, Dark Souls 3 changes a lot of stuff up, and there's a lot of new things to take in all at once, especially for newcomers to the series. So, to help you guys out, let's kick off this countdown with number 10. Weapon arts are special attacks or abilities that are activated by pressing the left trigger and generally give that weapon some unique utility that no other weapon or weapon type has. So, for example, let's say you have a claymore and you're going up against an enemy with a giant shield. For most characters, you'd have to deal with this by getting up close and using a lane kick or a shove to knock the shield away. But with the claymore, you can use a powerful weapon art attack that will blast away the shield if they block, and even if they don't, they'll still take big damage. Even bows have new weapon arts that make them even more powerful than before. Short bows can go into a rapid fire stance to do light damage extremely quickly and finish off an enemy that's just a pixel or two away from dying, while long bows have a sniper shot that deals big damage but with a very long startup time. Going into Dark Souls 3, you should always experiment with the weapon art of a new weapon whenever you pick it up. Not all of them are useful, and since they use up focus points, they can actually be kind of detrimental. But they often provide something that will make certain battles that would normally be very tough much easier. In at number 9, one of the holdovers that Dark Souls 3 took from Bloodborne is the ability to charge up your heavy attacks, making it ideal for weapons with long reach to catch enemies that are coming in. Unfortunately, you won't be able to stun enemies by sneaking up on them and hitting them with the fully charged heavy attack like you would be able to in Bloodborne. However, one trick that will work is backstabbing an enemy, then starting to charge your heavy attack to its max so that it lands as soon as they get up before they get a chance to do anything about it. In fighting games, we call this a meaty attack. Fortunately, you don't have to worry about wake up Shoryukens. For number 8, let's just rapidly run through a number of ground rules that still apply in Dark Souls 3. For Soul Series veterans, these will all be familiar, but newbies take note. Either learn the telltale silence of the mimic or smack all chests once before opening. You don't want this to be you. In the Souls game, stamina management is key. You should always try to leave at least a sliver of stamina whenever you're up close in order to roll away from a counterattack. Backstabs are amazingly effective ways to take down a tough enemy. Remember to lower your shield before going for them or it won't work. Smack suspicious looking walls to check for illusory walls. This is different from Dark Souls 2 where you just had to press a button to try to open the door. Manage your equip load. Wear a bunch of heavy armor and weapons and you'll be stuck with a nearly worthless dodge roll. Raising your vitality stat will allow you to wear heavier armor without the movement penalty. Keep all of these tips in mind and you'll be on your way to overcoming Dark Souls' uniquely steep difficulty curve. Number 7. Magic, pyromancy, and miracles all work very differently in Dark Souls 3 compared to prior Dark Souls games. And in fact, it's kind of a return to the way things worked in Demon Souls. You now have what's known as a focus meter, which governs all of your special abilities. New spells can be purchased, transposed, or found out in the world, but in order to actually use the spell, you'll need to attune it at a bonfire. In order to attune more spells, you'll need to invest a bit in the attunement stat. Any class can learn spells, pyromancies, and miracles, but only the Herald, Assassin, Sorcerer, Pyromancer, and Cleric classes actually start with any spells right off the bat. If you want to dip your feet into spellcasting without being one of these classes, you'll need to find not only a spell for you to use, but also a catalyst. Spells utilize staffs, pyromancies go through the pyromancy flame, and miracles use chimes or talismans. Number 6. You can always count on From Software to revamp the way you restore health from game to game, and Dark Souls 3 is no different. Dark Souls 3's Estus flask system is similar to how it worked in Dark Souls 2, where you start off with a small number of flasks, all of which are restored when resting at a bonfire, and in order to increase them, you must find and turn in Estus shards. But the big difference this time around is that you can actually allot your Estus usage to restore either health or focus points. So, just know that if you plan to make a character that's a straight up mage, you might have to sacrifice a few health restoratives in order to ensure that you have enough focus points to keep up your offensive capabilities until you reach the next bonfire. Number 5. After defeating the second real boss of the game, you'll get an item called the Transposing Kill, which you can take back to the Firelink Shrine and give to Ludlith, who's this short dude sitting on his throne. Doing so will enable you to take the valuable boss souls that you get from defeating bosses and transform them into badass boss weapons that are generally much stronger or have more powerful weapon arts than most of the normal weapons that you would find out in the world. Whenever you defeat a boss, always bring it back to Ludlith before using it for souls. You'll typically get a choice of about 3 distinct items that you can make per soul, and once you choose one, you'll miss out on the other options for the rest of the playthrough. So be sure you know which item will provide you with the most value before you transpose it. In at number 4, Embers are special items in Dark Souls 3 that are most similar to humanities from Dark Souls 1. Using one will return your character to his or her enkindled state, granting max HP and the ability to summon other players. There may be a temptation to use Embers whenever you're out of Estus flasks to act as kind of an extra healing item, but be careful, Embers aren't unlimited, and most shops only sell a small number of them. Burn through them too quickly and you may find yourself in a position where you really need help via a summon, but you aren't able to. Also note that being in enkindled form opens you up to invasions, so be careful with that. Number 3. Upgrading your weapons has always been a hugely important aspect of the Souls games, and in Dark Souls 3, it's thankfully easier and more intuitive than ever. All weapons, with the exception of certain unique and boss weapons, use the same materials to upgrade, so no more keeping track of what particular material upgrades what particular brand of weapon. Special gems can be used to infuse weapons with a certain strength. Like for example, fire gems will infuse a weapon with fire, reducing its regular base damage and scaling, but giving it fire damage. Before you infuse anything, make sure you've got a good handle on what that infusion actually does and whether it will actually help you in the long run. Pay attention to each weapon's attribute bonus. The better the letter, the better the bonus that weapon will get from scaling on that specific stat. If you find yourself with a weapon that has a really good scaling bonus for a stat that you're heavily invested in, you might want to avoid infusing that particular weapon with something that removes scaling in favor of more base or elemental damage. So mess around with it and find a weapon that works for you. If you feel like you've made a mistake with the infusion, you can use a shriving stone to undo that infusion and reset it back to its base stats. Just don't make too many mistakes because shriving stones aren't easy to come by. Number 2. Firelink Shrine acts as your home base in Dark Souls 3, and as such, you should treat it like your actual home. Pay it frequent visits even if you don't need to upgrade a weapon, level up, or buy anything. Things constantly change in Firelink Shrine. NPCs come, and NPCs go. Make sure to talk to each and every one of them until their dialogue is exhausted. You can frequently get new emotes, items, or even further along a questline just by listening to what they have to say. Oftentimes, you'll pick up something in the field, not know what it does, and then forget about it by the time you get back to Firelink. Get in the habit of always going through your inventory, examining unfamiliar items, and seeing if there's anyone at the shrine that might be able to do something with it. And the number one thing you need to know before starting a new game of Dark Souls 3 is that you need to explore. Dark Souls 3 is a game where valuable secrets hide around every corner. Just because you start making forward progress or beat a boss, it doesn't mean that you should just push forward without making another sweep through the area to make sure that you haven't missed out on any important treasures. Rushing through the game is one of the worst things that you can do, as it will rob you not only of valuable items that will make the game easier in the long run, but you also run the risk of missing out on some of the best content that Dark Souls 3 has to offer. We're talking optional bosses, entire areas with new enemies and treasures, and covenants. God, we haven't even gone over the covenants. Dark Souls 3 is such a deep and complex game that these 10 things don't even begin to scratch the surface. But hopefully they're a good starter point and will give you some base knowledge that will be helpful in figuring the rest out for yourself. Because that's really the joy of the Souls series. It's that satisfaction of pushing through intense difficulty using your own wits and skill. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, want to see more like it, subscribe to gameranx because we do videos like these all the time. Like seriously, every day. Crazy, right? This has been your friendly neighborhood Spidey, and I'll see you next time.